A worthy GM never purposely kills players' PCs. He presents opportunities for the rash and unthinking players to do that all on their own. Gary Gygax.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hole.
And I'm Lee Esses.
Mostly today, we are going to be talking to the DMs, the GMs, the tellers of the story, the narrators, about the choices they design for the players.
This is also something that you, as a storyteller who is writing your own book, should be doing for your characters. If they have some sort of agency, then that helps us feel like the character is involved and not just a victim of circumstance for the whole thing. If they are making choices, then we like the character a lot more, even if we don't always agree with the choices. But it's your job as the storyteller to design those choices. I recently finished a campaign with my group, and I gave the players the choice to join or try to fight their way out of the center of the cult's encampment. I honestly didn't know how the players would choose, which is really difficult for a DM when planning stuff out.
Yeah, you really have to put those choices at the end of a session so you have time to plan the fallout afterwards.
And that's exactly what I did. I gave them the choice to think about how they wanted their character to proceed, what made sense for their characters.
So whether you are talking about TTRPGs or about writing and storytelling and character choices, there are a few things that you need to know, particularly about designing the choice itself. You need to make sure that there can be an answer to a question. I think I've seen this entirely too much where DMs give players an impossible problem that there is no answer to.
And part of being a DM, at least in my experience, comes down to also guiding the characters and the players to a potential solution. If they feel like they're getting stuck, I have an idea of what that solution might be. I don't expect the characters to go about it the same way. They might throw one of the guards through one of the doors, and if they die a horrible death, then we know the other door is the safe one. They can solve the problem however they want, but I know that there is a solution. Another way to think about the choices that you are designing for your characters is the level of complexity you want to put into it. It can be something as simple as, which mode of transportation do you want to use to get to this other city?
Because without agency, without that choice, players don't feel like they're contributing. And in a writing sense, readers will sense that the characters didn't actually have a say, that they're making choices out of their character because the author said they must. So learning from a DM standpoint to allow characters to make choices that fit them will really help improve your storytelling ability.
And having your characters in your book make those choices helps everything feel less convenient. Because, hey, they just happen to have force powers, and they just happen to live on the same backwater planet as one of the greatest Jedi ever, and they just happen to do this, they just happen to do that. Once they start having their own agency, we start to admire the characters more.
I think anybody who has been in the TTRPG space for long enough has run into a player like this. Run into a player who tries to have the solution to everything, who tries to make themselves the main character of a campaign. And it's rough. It's not something anybody wants. As a DM or as an author, having these characters that conveniently have the answer to everything is just not realistic, and it's not fun.
The next part of the choices to consider is your setup and payoff. There are a lot of stories out there of someone who, at the very beginning of the campaign, adopted Boblin the Goblin. And having these little moments of setup that you can then pay off and go, no, he was actually a spy for the archvillain the entire time, and you just forgot about his existence, so that's on you. These types of setups can be super fun for the aha moments in both your readers and your players.
We will talk about backstory, weaving in the backstory in about a week. We're going to talk right now more about things that happen within the campaign, setting it up and paying it off. For these setups, objects are really useful. in-game and in books, for placing a setup that characters and readers don't necessarily have to think about until it pays off. These are your Chekhov's guns or magic items that can be only used once, and so the character is holding on to it for that exact perfect moment.
Which they won't ever use it because they think the moment's still in the future. It's fun for messing with your players. Having these relics, these items, the one ring, these things, help with this setup in order to pay off later on. So if you are designing either your main character for your book or you're designing a campaign, think about things as storytelling objects instead of just set decoration.
And people as well. NPCs, the Boblin the Goblins, those are really good for setups because they can be introduced, they can become loved, and then they can cause heartbreak. They can also give quests and have a very straightforward payoff of, go do this, and I will give you this.
And it could be a combination of the two. I'm giving you a quest to save my child. Oh, you didn't save the child in time. Now the child has become this lich zombie puppet, and it's become a much bigger problem. Or, oh, you did save the child, and you happened to do it right when my cousin, who's the Duke, happened to be in town. He wants to express his appreciation. Here's a plot line.
When it comes to the payoffs of any of these things that you set up, you don't always have to know what the payoff is when you're putting the setup in place. The Chekhov's gun can be there and just have no real purpose until you come to that right point. So we always encourage you to have a list of setups. This really applies to authors as well. A list of things that you have that can happen, that can be used, and you may not know how yet. So that if you need that payoff moment, if you need something to happen, you can look over the list and see if there is a thing that you set up before that can be used for the purpose of this payoff that you need to happen.
This is, as a DM, very useful for guiding players, especially when they go a little too far off the rails that you had planned. So they decided to go investigate the garden instead of the temple. And as soon as they get close to a statue in the garden that you initially had put in the temple, but now the statue's in the garden, then this soul compass that you had given them 4 sessions ago starts glowing bright red. Okay, that setup has helped you point them in a direction that they might have just gone pretty statue and then moved on. So when you need to guide your players, those little footholds that you've set up in place are super helpful for telling this story.
I think especially when it comes to the objects, the magical items that players are holding on to and waiting to use at the right moment, those can have amazing payoffs because of the player's decision to finally use it, to finally do this thing. And it creates a beautiful moment within the storytelling that you can work with.
Part of designing choices for your players is dealing with the consequences. I think this is one of the hardest lessons for new DMs to learn, and especially pantsers who give their characters choices and then the character's like, nah, I'm going to go to the library instead of the prom. And you're like, wait, yes, that's in character, I know that, but pantsers give their main characters a lot of sway in how the story goes. And you kind of have to deal with those consequences, even if it's not 100% what you were planning.
Because inevitably, whether within TTRPGs or in storytelling, players, characters will find solutions. They will find a path that was not expected, that you did not account for. But when it comes to that moment of decision, it makes sense to take this third road. And most of the time, the story is far more interesting for that decision. You have to let your players or characters make those decisions that you didn't expect, but will lead the story in a direction that is going to be richer, that is going to be complete, and more within the character's choices and desires.
There is a saying that you will see all over the place, and you'll hear a lot of DMs say to their players when a player decides they want to do something unexpected. And that saying is, you can certainly try.
There's a couple of different ways to say it as well that convey different ideas. There's the, you can certainly try, which is very like, you can, but please don't. You will end up dead. Or there's the, ooh, you can certainly try, and it's going to be fun, and let's do it, do it, do it, do it.
And those are often the same scenario of, this is going to get you killed, let's do it anyway. Which is what our quote was at the beginning of the episode. But there is a certain amount of inevitability that you get as a storyteller, as a narrator, as a DM, so that if things go off the rails, you can kind of loop them back on. And that inevitability, I think, is a lot of the skill that comes with DMing, letting them figure out wherever they want to go, or looping them back around and guiding them to the stuff that you had planned because you have no idea what's behind that door.
So getting to these decisions, even though as the DM or the author, it may seem really apparent to you how this answer would be or what the decision would be, sometimes characters do unexpected things. And that's okay. You can let them do that and you have to work around it. And that's one way that TTRPGs really help authors, is to allow choices, but back it up with consequences.
And that is the payoff, the consequence, the quest reward. These are why we make the choices. Setting up these choices, those are the moments you will never forget in your storytelling. When your character is like, you know what? I'm going to light the school on fire. Okay, they're making a choice. Let's go. Let's see what happens with that. Because you will find enormous amounts of joy when those little moments pay off as something huge. But you have to put those footholds in place, and then throughout the entire process,
write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.